In this video, we are going to look at using greatest common factors, and more specifically, greatest common monomial factors. The greatest common factor is the largest factor that each term has in common. Greatest common monomial factor involves the variables. So when we say greatest common factor, we're talking more in terms of numbers. When we say greatest common monomial factor, we're including variables. And the reason this is important is because we're going to be using the zero product property for solving. And when we're using the zero product property, we need to have it in factored form, and we want to factor out the greatest common monomial factor. So we're going to be looking for a monomial that divides evenly into each term. So the first thing we want to look at are the coefficients. In this case, we have 12 and 3. And I'm going to list the factors of 12 and 3. The factors of 3 are just 1 and 3. The factors of 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. The largest factor the two numbers have in common is 3. So I'm going to write a 3. Then I need to look at my variables. I have x to the third, and I have x squared. And I ask myself, what is the greatest number of x's the two terms have in common? And the greatest number that they have in common is x squared. They each have at least 2 x's. So I'm going to write x squared behind my 3. And then I'm going to write parentheses. And this is where I start asking myself, what do I take times 3x squared to give me 12x cubed? Well, what do I take times 3 to get 12? That would be 4, because 12 divided by 3 is 4. What can I take times x squared to give me x cubed? And that would be an x. Or I could ask myself, how many more x's do I have in x cubed than I have in x squared? And that's just 1 more x. Plus, what would I take times 3x squared to get 3x squared? Well, that would be getting the same value, so it would be a 1. And I have factored out the greatest common monomial factor, 3x squared, and I have rewritten my polynomial as a product of a monomial with a binomial, 3x squared times 4x plus 1. And you can always check, because if you multiply, if you distribute, you should get the polynomial you started with. Let's take a look at another one. Here we have 8y squared plus 24y. It doesn't hurt to always take the time to write out your factors. So we have 8 and 24. And for 8, we have 1, 2, 4, and 8. For 24, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24. The largest factor the coefficients have in common is 8. So I'm going to write 8. Then I'm going to look at the variables. We have y squared and we have y. What is the greatest common? How many y's do they have in common? They have at least 1 y in common for each term. So I'm going to write an 8y as the greatest number of y's they each have in common. I'm going to open a set of parentheses. I'm going to ask myself, what do I take times 8y to give me 8y squared? Well, 8 divided by 8 is 1. And y times y would give me y squared. Now, you don't have to write the 1. You could just write y. But I'm going to write the 1 so that we understand that 8 times 1 gives me the 8. And then we have plus. What do I take times 8y to give me 24y? Well, 24 divided by 8 is 3. And to get y, it would just be a 1. So I don't need any additional y's. So my monomial, my greatest common monomial factor is 8y. Times my binomial is 1y plus 3, or you can write it as 8y times y plus 3. Let's take a look at one more. Here we have 6x to the fourth plus 8x cubed. So again, I'm going to start with my coefficients. I'm going to list my factors, 1, 2, 3, and 6. 1, 2, 4, and 8. And the greatest common factor of 6 and 8 is 2. So we're going to have a 2. When I look at the variables, the greatest number of x's that they have in common is 3 of them. So my greatest common monomial factor is 2x to the third. Open my parentheses. What do I take times 2x to the third to give me 6x to the fourth? Well, 6 divided by 2 is 3. And I have an extra x on the x to the fourth, then I do x cubed, so that becomes 3x. Then it's plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. I have the same number of x's, so I don't need an x on this term. So this factors out as 2x to the third times 3x plus 4.